Hey BrewTubers, happy Homebrew Wednesday. So in the end I didn't film as nearly as much of this brew day as I probably should have. I'm here brewing my last beer, my Irish Stout, or my Irish Oatmeal Stout. I haven't decided on the full name yet, although I've given it a cute name on Beersmith, which I'm not gonna mention here. What ended up happening is there's a possibility that John at Better Nesters, who weighed out the grains for me so I wouldn't be able to pick them up quickly this past Wednesday night, gave me an extra pound or so of grain because I ended up getting, according to Beersmith, 94% efficiency for my mash. So that means is that my pre-boil gravity was, instead of being 1042, it was around 1052. So I called Better Nesters, and one of the workers there, OVA, another good home brewing friend of mine, recommended that I shorten the boil. So he said 30 minutes, but I've never done a 30-minute boil. So I'm going to compromise and do a 45-minute boil, and I've just lowered the flame from the high setting to 6, as you can see, from the high to number 6. I lowered the boil just a tiny bit, which is actually, the 6 is where I used to keep it. It's on 2 burners. I'm using my older kettle because one of the last possibility of the infection from the ESB was maybe because my 3-piece ball valve on my new SS kettle hasn't been cleaned well enough recently. So I'm using this kettle. So I'm still going to use the same hops that I'm going to use. So I decided that the hops are going to be US Goldings and Fuggles, which I've already added, and then a newer hop that I got from the 2014 crop called Fantasia, which is I believe is a blend, and it's supposed to supposedly add some noble hop character and some creamy and caramel flavor, which I've never heard from hop. But since I'm brewing a stout, I thought I'd try towards the end of the boil to add the 2 ounces of it that I have and see what it gives to the overall character of the beer. So as you see here, it's boiling nicely, and I'll film as much as I can, for the rest of the brew day. But I'm really taking this cautiously, just to make sure that even if I do end up overshooting, I'm not going to dilute, because OVA made a good point and said that I shouldn't dilute, because I'm going to dilute the color of the stout, and because it's only, according to Beersmith, about 30 SRM. I don't want to dilute it and make it look more like a brown ale or a light porter than a stout. So I'm going to leave it that. But by shortening the boil by 15 minutes, hopefully I won't, instead of maybe being a 10, I don't want it to be a 1065 beer, so maybe it'll be a 1060 beer. So we'll see what happens with that in the end. But overall, that's what's going on. And when I get to my post-boil gravity, I'm sure I'll talk about it somewhere in this video. Cheers. Hey BrewTubers, Barry here. So, through all the craziness of the day of taking care of baby stuff in my apartment and stuff, I didn't really end up filming much of Brew Day. I don't know how I'm going to splice what tiny bit I have together, but I poured myself a glass of my Belgian Pale Ale just to relax for my second beer of the day. So cheers. still tasting great. And I'll wrap up brew day vlog style. So what ended up happening was, as I may have spoken about in a pre-boil clip, I somehow overshot my target pre-boil gravity by about 10 points. Now, one interesting fact was, let me put my beer down. Okay. So, one interesting thing that happened was, so I called Bitter and Esters and I spoke to one of the guys there, OVA, who I mentioned earlier, I believe, and he said to do a shorter boil. And as I said earlier, I was going to do a 45-minute boil, but it was probably closer to 50 minutes. And then towards the end, after putting in the chiller and it was coming back up to a boil after I added a 10-minute hop addition. So you know what, maybe let's test the gravity of some of the runnings that are still in the mash tun, because I hadn't cleaned it out yet. And I knew we still had time on the boil to sanitize them. So I checked it, and the first little bit I pulled out was still at 10:15, which is still over, you know, where you want to cut off at 10:10. So I'm like, okay, I'll add a little bit. Maybe I'll take a little more. So I took a little more, and I think in total was maybe like a little over a liter. And the lowest I went was 10:12, and so that's still slightly above the threshold of 10:10. And then I did, after the about 50-minute boil, I took a gravity reading and it said at 10:52, but somehow my refractometer, as it cools down closer to room temperature, it goes up. So it's around between 10:52 and 10:54, which in the end is only about 2 to 4 points over my target of 10:50. So, you know, and of course, with the added runnings towards the end of the boil, I collected quite a bit, and I had to take out a quart because I realized that I didn't decant my one, like, a little over liter starter, and I didn't want to, like, you'd have no headspace whatsoever in my new carboy. So I should mention that, if I didn't mention earlier, that for this beer, after the ESB, little infection I had, we'll have to see just how bad it affected the beer now that it's carbonated, and I'll be tapping it in the coming days once it settles at serving pressure. So I bought a new carboy, and I sterilized the bung and the plastic elbow that you guys have seen with my blow-off setup in boiling water. I put it in boiling water for about 25 minutes or so to kill anything that was leached into it, into both of the elbow and the bung. And then I had extra of the same tubing, so I just put a brand new piece of tubing. Because I couldn't find any more plastic elbows last night, so I decided just to plop it in with the boiling water, and luckily it didn't melt like at all. Even if it did a little bit, it didn't really affect the integrity of it. So yeah, so I'm glad I was able to do that. I hope it's funny, I keep switching arms, but my shoulders are tired from lifting stuff today in the apartment. So then of course I pitched the yeast. It's in there, and then in this video, and after this, I'll give you a fermentation clip. I just wanted to film this quick clip and let you know that in the end I was able to recover. Instead of having a 1060 or more beer, I actually have a nice 1050 or 1050, between 1052 and 1054, which is pretty much on the money for what I was looking for. And I didn't dilute with water, I was able to dilute with running. Hey BrewTubers, Barry here, yet another vlog style clip for this Homebrew Wednesday. I'm going to overlay a clip here that I just filmed using my phone's flashlight to show you the true color of my ESB. So the head already died down while I was trying to film that clip, but I did recently raise the serving pressure of my Keezer to about 13 or 14 psi, because not only were like beers, somehow, even with being at high pressure for a few days and then dialing it back, they still weren't tasting as carbonated on the palate as I would like, and also the head retention just sucked. This is pouring a little over carbed because I left it at 30 psi for a few hours too much, so it's going to take time for the keg to settle. But I just thought after last week talking about the infection problem, I thought, once it's on tap, that I should include a clip of me tasting it. So let's go in for the details. So as you see here, in the clip, or you see here in the clip, it's a nice, even in this light, actually in my kitchen, it's a nice golden color, reddish gold, but more towards the gold than the real red. It looks redder in this lower light, and it's pretty carbonated. I did 30 psi for like 3.5 days instead of 3 days, and then it's been at about 14 psi for a day and a half as of filming this on Tuesday night. So in the aroma, no funk, no signs of infection, no Brett, no any other wild yeast. Exactly what I was smelling before I got worried, and was taking a million samples. So it's really bready. I've never had a beer where it was so basic. There's some maris otter, some Crystal 60, and a touch of honey malt. So I've never brewed a beer that was so basic in terms of its Englishness. So when people brew a Fuller's ESB clone, I should know they just use. Some people use flaked maize, but mostly it's Crystal 60 and maris otter, or English Crystal and maris otter. But for in this case, I use American Crystal. But it has not much of a caramel, but like a sweet maltiness, like a sweet bready maltiness with a little bit of the honey malt poking through. Not much of the Fuggles and Goldings hops in there, despite it being a bitter. But let's go in for the taste. Cheers. So the taste, that developed, rich, bready flavor really shines through. A little bit of fruitiness from esters from the yeast and the hops, like really marry perfectly with the honey malt. So you get that like sweet, almost like sourdough, but not sour, like that really artisanal bready sweetness, and like you would get from a nice like Italian bread almost, but in a beer form. And then you get that backed up and sweetened made even more complex by that honey malt mixing with the fruity esters from the hops and the yeast. So overall, I'm really happy. I was kind of, after doing a 1 gallon batch and the honey malt kind of shining a little too much, I was kind of worried about what it would taste like in a big batch, but overall I'm really happy with my twist on the style. I used US Goldings instead of East Kent Goldings, but in terms of my being authentic to an ESB, I think my real twist on the recipe was adding the 1/4 pound or 4 ounces of honey malt. So overall, I'm really happy with it. I'll integrate this clip somewhere in my Homebrew Wednesday. Hope you guys are keep brewing great beer, and I'll see you in my next video.